Hello and welcome to EURACTIV's Agrifood Podcast. I'm Julia Dahm.
I'm Gerardo Fortuna.
And I'm Natasha Fitz.
And here's your weekly update on all things agriculture and food in the EU from EURACTIV's Agrifood news team.
This week, livestock leak and an interview with the Rapporteur on the pesticide file at European Parliament.
So this week, we are going to bring you a little bit of a juicy...
But before that...
Oh, wait, what?
We might have a new feature of this podcast.
Last week we had the sound effects. This week we have a new...
We have the quiz.
Okay, going slightly off piste, but I'm listening, yeah.
No, but you actually started, so you have to tell the option of this quiz.
The option. Oh, the option of the quiz, yes. Okay, we were discussing this just before we started recording.
There are no option, actually. It's just
the question is, which two MEPs feature on Brussels buses?
Yeah, the direction, like the
end of the line.
Yeah.
The one that shows on the bus, you know. There are two, both of which have to do with, well, believe it or not,
agriculture. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
we will tell you at the end.
At the end. So don't skip right to the end. Listen to us first, and then you're going to have your reward.
Okay, that's right. That's a good way to keep people on tenterhooks, keep them sucked in. Okay.
Besides
that,
yeah,
as I was saying, we have something juicy for you this week, which was a juicy leak. Ooh, that should have a sound effect.
One leak per week, basically.
1 leak a week.
Nice poem.
It's been quite a leaky week, actually. Yeah. Anyway, so this particular leak that we're going to talk about today is about the Industrial Emissions Directive. So let's go back and talk a little bit about what this is. It's quite a hard document to talk about because I think you need so much background knowledge to understand why it's interesting. But we'll do our best to bring that to you. So
please bear with us, even if it sounds technical. It's actually super interesting and political.
Exactly, the little caveat for you. I promise it's interesting. So there is this proposed overhaul of the Industrial Emissions Directive, which was unveiled by the European Commission back in April. Now, this aims to reduce harmful emissions coming from industrial installations. Now, the dramatic part, the controversial part of this, is that this scope is being expanded to include some of the largest livestock farms in the EU, which, of course, caused a bit of controversy from stakeholders. The question being, at what point do you classify a farm as industrial? When are you industrial? There's obviously a cutoff point that has to be put within this
super controversial association, industry and farming.
Exactly. And so everyone was very worried. A lot of livestock farmers, there's a lot of concern about this. Where is this cutoff point going to be? And to get this cutoff point, this threshold, the Commission proposed this idea of livestock units, which is a bit of a complicated term. Basically, it's kind of revolves around a basic unit of what livestock is, and it's based on cattle.
Yeah.
So different amounts of poultry add up to one livestock unit. And the Commission came up with this figure of 150 livestock units. So they're basically saying that beyond this point, your farm is considered industrial. We're kind of, you're going to basically going to fall under this directive, and they're going to try and slash your emissions. Hope you're with me so far.
It's also good to point out that some livestock sectors were already comply. They had to comply with the rules of the Industrial Emission Directive already, even before the revision.
Not many though. It was like 2%.
I think 4% of the pig farms.
Something like this. Yeah, 2% of all livestock farms in the EU.
So the idea, the ambition of the Commission is to increase this percentage in order to embrace more farm and to force this farm in respecting the general ambition of the Industrial Emission Directive, which is curbing emissions from basically
industrial installations.
Yeah.
And so the Commission put forward its 150 livestock units threshold. This was the point that they say this is where we think the cutoff should be. And so the Commission was saying that this adds up to around 13% of livestock production across Europe, across the EU generally. And then there was a bit more of a, sector specific. So it was 18% of pig farms, 15% of poultry farms, 10% of cattle farms.
Yeah.
Right. So these were the numbers that we were getting from.
And the talks at the moment were all around this percentage.
Yeah. It was
also
the explanation
important because it's the argument for saying, Environment Commissioner Sinkevičius bases a lot of his argumentation around this Commission proposal on these numbers, because he's saying it's not that high of a percentage of farms, but it's a high percentage of emissions that we're getting through this threshold. So yeah, it's key to justifying the Commission's proposal as well.
Exactly, because that was always the argument put forward. This is the figure, and this is the percentage. The percentage of farms that are going to be impacted by this. Except, let's come back to the juicy details, because as they like to say in Brussels, the devil is always in the details. Actually, we managed to get our hands on a leak this week that showed that this figure was based on data from 2016, which in and of itself is not necessarily a problem if that data is still reflective of the current situation. But there is actually more recent data from 2020 that was not able, and I will say this caveat point here, it was not able to be factored into to the Commission's proposal because it wasn't verified at the time they were doing the impact assessment. So this 2016 data is what's been used as the baseline of their impact assessment.
They're still undergoing the final verification.
Yeah.
So the Eurostat haven't published yet this figure. Mm-hmm. Which means, again, there's no way to put the blame on the Commission on this.
No, but the lack of the latest information has not stopped policymakers still going ahead with the proposal, right? The fact that they haven't had the most recent data, they're still forging ahead, basically. So we got our hands on this presentation that was a Commission presentation to the working parties in the Council.
The DGM.
Exactly, yeah. And this
DGM is the environmental service of which is the one who's leading the proposal, who drafted the proposal, and the leading service at the Commission on this dossier.
Mm-hmm. And this presentation basically puts side by side, it basically models this 150 livestock units threshold as well as other thresholds based on the 2016 data and based on the 2020 data. And what it shows is that actually once you factor in 2020 data, this percentage of impacted farms changes radically. I mean, radically. So we're talking here an increase from 18% for pigs to 61% of pig farms, from 15% of poultry farms to 58% of poultry farms, whereas cattle, on the other hand, is only a rise of 2.5%, so up from 10% to 12.5%.
And what happened in the meantime, like from 2016 to 2020?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think this is like a large part of the really interesting, it shows basically a massive consolidation of the farming sector. So a massive concentration, moving, basically consolidating small farms into bigger farms. So of course here we're talking about the percentage of the impacted farms, right? There's less farms number-wise, but in terms of the percentage of farms that were being impacted by this proposal, it's bigger.
Yeah.
That's essentially the crux of the matter.
Indeed. Again, as Natasha said, if you look at the numbers, you have fewer farms that will be impacted using 2020.
Like by number. Yeah.
But at the same time, you have more than a half of the percentage of the entire sector, which means, again, the socio-economical impact is huge for the farms. So because it's all about how the sector, you're basically revolutionizing a sector by imposing new rules, even for instance, if you think about even jobs that needs to be created in a sector in order to comply with certain rules. I mean, the administrative burden and so on.
And I mean, in and of itself, that's fine if the Commission decides this is the way, that it's fine. They still want to bring 61% or whatever under the threshold. It actually adds up to a 20% overall of all EU livestock farms when you take into account mixed farms, things like that. But it's arguably a bit disingenuous to try and sell your 150, the 150 livestock threshold using these percentages, and then actually the reality is it's a different amount of percentage that's going to be impacted, essentially, if you factor in 2020 data. And actually also an interesting point is that as this is a directive, there will be a 2-year transitional period that will be allowed before it's entering into force. So even if we manage basically to get a deal sealed in 2023, the directive won't actually be implemented until 2025. So if the data is still based on 2016 data, that data is going to be nearly a decade old. So I think that was quite it's quite revealing. It's quite interesting of the process that this has gone through, and it shows just how much the details matter when you're talking about these
Of course.
files, these
particularly
technical files.
when you talk about thresholds and baseline, because in the end, without commenting on the impact itself on the livestock sector, from the methodological point of view, you have the main tool, which is the livestock unit, the main tool to apply the conditions set up in the revision of the industrial emission directive, that it performs quite well when it comes to cattle, in the sense that even a changing farming scenario, the impact is basically the same, let's say.
Yeah.
While if you change the factors in other sector like poultry and pigs, in particular pigs farming, it gives you a completely different outcome, which means that probably it's not particularly fit for this. In the end, it's a threshold that you decide basically when you're creating the policy, no? So it's not science. It's just when you're going to put the bar.
It's also interesting because, when we're talking with different commission officials about their reasoning behind this, they always talk about the need to tackle cattle because cattle is the main methane emitter. But actually here we were talking about impacting mostly poultry and pig farms.
Yeah, there's always the reference on the global methane pledge reached in Glasgow 2 years ago. And the reference is always, as you said, on cows. And again, it seems that the livestock unit is working with cattle, because it seems it's also true that the cattle farming didn't experience the same level of consolidation, and but yeah, absolutely, this it's something that should be taken into consideration, and we are sure that gonna have an impact on the current process.
We've already had quite a lot of reactions about it.
Yeah.
Can't necessarily speak about them, but let's just say there was a fair amount of backlash to this, and the story's not over. We'll definitely be revisiting this, but do check out the article on EURACTIV.
So we promised you guys that we'd reveal the names of the MEPs that are on the bus lines. We said we'd do it at the end, but actually we're going to do it now because we want to keep you on your toes a bit and avoid that people skip to the end.
Yes, I like it. Yes.
Yeah, I've made a good teacher.
Very good.
So who on the buses?
Drum roll.
I'll do the drum roll.
Very good drum roll.
Thanks.
We downgraded the sound effect from a real sound effect to
okay, downgrade. This is an upgrade. I did them myself. All right, Julia, who is it?
So the first MEP is a conservative one from the EPP, and it's Daniel Buda.
Aha.
So we have a bus line with the terminus.
I don't remember the number.
Buda. I don't remember the number.
But
either,
it's next to Schumann. Schumann is where the Berlaymont is. Berlaymont is European Commission.
And we see this all the time.
Yeah.
It says the 56 bus. It has 28 stops departing from Schumann, ending in Buda. There we go. All kinds of good facts for you guys today.
But
the other one.
So we're all about having balance, being politically balanced. So the second bus line MEP comes from the Greens, and it's and she's an Austrian one. She's called Sarah Wiener. So there's a bus line with Wiener as the terminus.
There is, and
95.
90. You know this off the top of your head. That's so impressive.
95 because it's the one from and this one it's passed through the European Parliament. You can take it from.
You have so much knowledge of this. Okay, great. Yeah, you're right. It's the 95 bus. I just looked it up.
I told you.
From the Grand Place.
It also also arrived in VUB, one of the University of Brussels.
Wow, you lived there for a long time.
No, I'm not gonna say because I was supposed to say something about where Natasha lives, but
please don't.
I'm not giving this kind of hints, but
great. Okay.
Again,
and
don't leave too much.
This leads us in nicely because we have Sarah Wiener as our guest today.
Indeed, yeah, she's having a lot of a lot to do lately as the rapporteur, so the MEP in charge of the reform on the EU's pesticides legislation. So this is one of the other very hot and contentious topics, after we already talked about one contentious topic with the emissions directive. This is another very political one. And Sarah Wiener is the MEP in charge for the ENVI committee, so the Environment Committee in the European Parliament, of this legislation. And recently...
Who has the competence on this file, although it's a bit more complicated than that.
It's a bit more complicated than that. We've had quite some drama going on behind the scenes, don't we, Natasha?
Love some drama. Love me some drama. Well, I said it was a leaky week, and so this is the other leak that I was referring to. But yeah, there were 2 letters this week. Actually, this was I've not really seen this much drama with this is quite juicy as well,
between
isn't it?
agriculture.
No, not between Agri and Envy. There's always drama between Agri and Envy, but the way that they went about it was quite interesting, I thought. Basically, there were 2 letters from the chairs of each of these, so the Agriculture Committee of the European Parliament and also the Environment Committee. So we're talking here about Norbert Lins for agriculture and Pascal Canfin.
There are no bus lines with the name of Canfin.
Sad, I know.
Lins.
That would be great. I'd be really into that. I bet they do exist somewhere. If anyone finds a bus line anywhere that ends in Lins or Canfin, I'd really appreciate that.
This is an appeal.
An appeal to our listeners. Yeah. Anyway, there were these 2 letters, both addressed to President Roberta Metsola, the President of the Parliament. And basically they're fighting over the sustainable use of pesticides regulation. So there was this proposal from the Agri Committee to have this joint hearing. And this was supposed to look at some gaps to do with, it's about productivity basically, and how it would impact productivity, and basically trying to fill some gaps in the impact assessment. But Canfin wrote to Metsola saying, absolutely not. We're in charge here. We're not doing this. The Agri Committee has competence on only one part of the SUR, which is about integrated pest management. And
the amendment on the common agricultural policy.
Yeah, exactly.
That will bring
the part about CAP, basically. Yeah.
That will allow integrated pest management to be funded with the common agricultural policy measures.
Yes.
Money.
So this is the area that they have some space on, the Agri Committee.
A tiny little area.
Yeah, but big enough to cause a ruckus, to quote your favourite word. And basically he said, this is not your area. No, this is for us. Didn't want the joint hearing. Also threw some shade about there being no joint timetable, about Agri not working together. I think, what was the word that he used? Not reflecting the principle of good cooperation between the parliamentary committees. Ooh. And then Lins decided,
that's quite the side dig.
Yeah, it's quite like a British, I will send a letter, kind of like a very strongly worded, you can feel the sentiment behind it. And then Norbert Lins wrote to Metsola as well about the same theme, actually on Valentine's Day.
Whoa.
There's no love lost
romantic
between these committees, I have to say. Basically attacking back and saying that the Agri Committee wants to move forward on this, but there's loads of uncertainty being created by the Environment Committee. There's a lot of strain on good cooperation, and to bring Sarah Wiener into the mix, which leads us on nicely to our interview. He also directly bashed Sarah Wiener, who, as we said, is the rapporteur for the Environment Committee, for already publishing her draft report on this file without actually consulting or having any kind of consultation with the Agri Committee. So actually in this letter, he actually goes directly for this. So quite interesting to hear. It's a pretty timely moment to hear what Sarah has to say about her dealings on this file, about how things are going, and her feeling for how the cooperation will work in the future. So let's hear what she has to say.
Okay, Sarah, so in your view, in the draft report that you tabled for the position of the Parliament, what are the, let's say, 3 most important changes? I know there's a lot in there, but let's go with three most important changes that you made compared to the original Commission proposal, and what's kind of the idea behind them? Can you walk us through that a bit?
The 3 more important points is firstly, reduce highly hazardous pesticides by 18%. instead of only 50% as the Commission has proposed. This is so important because there are over 50 so-called candidates for substitution in the EU. And these candidates for substitution are on the list of replacement since 2015, but nothing happened so far. And these are pesticides, they are carcinogenic, can make us infertile, affects children development. So these chemical substances, they are very harmful to our health, even in the smallest quantity, like endocrine disruptor. And it has a huge impact of our environment. The scientists know that they are highly hazardous, and I think it is just fair to reduce this by 80%. But they are still being used, even though there are alternatives. Difenoconazole, this is a fungicide, for example, is a dangerous fungicide used on apple farms. You can replace it by baking soda easily. So this would be my first point. Secondly, make integrated pest management work. In the last suit from 2009, it was already made mandatory, but it did not work. Member states didn't make any efforts and didn't reduce pesticides and didn't make the IPM define and mandatory. So we made a clear cascade. What does mean integrated pest management? What is the definition? And it has to be mandatory. So it could be crop rotation, monitoring, or mechanical methods, but be exhausted before chemical substances come into play. I think this is very fair and very understandable that we should first try all tools we have and just in the end use chemical pesticides. The third point was a really outcry in whole Europe. It leads to sensitive areas. The Commission proposal, I think, was protected too much landscape areas. Let's put it like this. But so much sensitive areas that it would be not possible to do agriculture in a lot of member states because they had too much protected areas. It's also a question of definition. We cannot ban pesticides over such a large area. It has to be reasonable and practical. So we want that agriculture is possible in protected areas. So therefore, we propose the following relaxations. Nitrate-sensitive areas should be expanded from the ban. In addition, biopesticides should remain allowed where nature conservation is not the primary concern. And so in national parks and public playgrounds and in cities, pesticides are to remain banned. Elsewhere, we are making compromises. It's about working with agriculture, not against it.
Okay, so you already mentioned a few elements like this 80% target for the most hazardous pesticides that definitely make your draft much more ambitious on many issues than the original Commission draft, and certainly much more ambitious than the position of many member states and also many other political parties in the European Parliament. So how optimistic are you that this proposal that you're making will be accepted both within the Parliament and the other political groups and also by the member states? Where do you expect pushback there?
The lobby, the agricultural lobby, and I have to say all right wing, from the very right wing to the right wing, are against, from the first second, against any pesticides reduction. They don't want to work, they don't want to negotiate, they don't want to give any compromises, they don't want to do with a time schedule. So it's not about few things they mention, this has to be better or this is worse, but they don't propose anything who is what what could be helpful. So, but it's not about what I believe. It's about to do the right thing and then to find the compromise and to negotiate with everybody. I'm the rapporteur from the whole European Parliament, but I see myself in the first hand. I see myself as a MEP from the European folk, and to do better for the environment, for our health, and for the people who don't want to eat poisoned food in the whole chain. It's very simple. And how we do that, how we get the very important gains for our surviving and for our children, that's the question. Maybe there are a lot of ways. I proposed now, I think, a very practically robust draft, changed a lot more, like the harmonized risk indicator, because it was not practical. We just go measure tons and not the grade of poisoning. This has to be changed, and then we have to help, of course, the farmers in this transition, also with money, also with knowledge, also with examples. So there's a lot more in this draft, and I hope that people who knows that we don't have another chance than to get free of this really expensive and energy loaded pesticides and mineral fertilizer to have a better future. So simple.
All right. So one quite interesting aspect of your proposal that we haven't talked about, of your draft, is this idea that you introduce of a tax on hazardous pesticides that should help finance kind of the implementation of this law. So can you talk us through how you envisage this a bit?
Yes, I think we have the law should say, and it's like this, that extended producer responsibility should pay for their damage. Yes, for the very first time, they would be asked to pay the bill for the damage their products do. This is a very important step to take, because these companies make profits from products while ignoring health and environmental risk associated with them. Who pays all this damaging? It's the society. But it's also the future. So I think it would just fair to say who damage our environment, our health has to pay for it. Also for the sickness for the farmers, there is over 1.3 million poisoned farmers from pesticides. There are different cancers like non-Hodgkin lymphoma and also Parkinson. There are, how do you say, in France and Italy, they know that they can be paid because by farmers and gardeners, because it's known that it can come from pesticides. And this is increasing. So Parkinson doubled in the last 20 years, and it goes on and on. So we have to react, and we have to ask ourselves, who is responsible for that? If you want to put more dangerous and more pesticides in our environment, in our body, in our milk, breast milk, in our urine, in our blood, I mean, at least you have to be aware that you can't do anything and pay the others. So I think this is very reasonable to take this point. And further, we need money for the transition, and why not let paying the industry he do harm?
So that's all from us this week. This week, the Agrifood Podcast was produced by EURACTIV's Agrifood news team. That's Gerardo Fortuna, Natasha Foot, and Julia Dahm, with the technical support of Abby Chiori.
You can also find this podcast on all major streaming platforms. That includes Amazon, Apple, Spotify, and Stitcher.
Be sure to subscribe to our newsletter so you don't miss the latest agricultural news from the EU. I'm Gerardo Fortuna. Thanks for listening, and see you next week.